So we had a little foreshadowing that I gave an hour ago or so about the panel. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, teeing it up again. You all saw some of the questions, and hopefully have had a chance to mull over some of the issues and questions that we raised earlier about yet another amazing technology coming out or at least trying to change and influence not only healthcare, but our health and well-being. So we have 5 people on the panel, and I have to say, this is an amazing group. Everybody here represents some aspect of AI, of healthcare, entrepreneurism, lots of different points of view. And I think rather than me introducing each of you guys, I'm going to have each of you, starting with Walter, just say who you are, and I'd like you to answer, maybe in a fairly short and concise way, your greatest hopes and greatest fears about AI and health. And I didn't prep them on this, so.
Walter de Brouwer, I'm a computational linguist. And so my greatest hopes for AI is that it comes very soon. And I hope it's my greatest fear it doesn't come soon enough, because we are actually losing neurons, sextillions of neurons by the second, because of the fertility rate going down and life expectancy going up. And I think we now have this great technology that we don't have to use organic substrates, but can put actually intelligence straight into silicon, and that intelligence has to go somewhere.
And Walter, what are you doing right now?
So my company is a deep language company on omics, so for biology. We're a business-to-business company.
Yeah, and Walter goes way back with the internet and coming out of IT, and he's actually a linguist by training, and started the company Scanadu with his wife, Sam, who's here. And they have this new venture, which I want to hear a little bit more about. So, Ron?
So, Ron Gutman, the founder and CEO of HealthTap, now a network more than 108,000 physicians here in the United States, another 2,700 healthcare professionals in New Zealand, and expanding this year all over the world. We connect doctors with hundreds of millions of people all over the world to help them access better care on their terms. And we're very excited about the opportunity to work not only with individuals, and HealthTap has a consumer application that you can access by downloading the app or going to our website, or we're actually working now with healthcare systems, with large insurance companies, providers, healthcare systems, and governments to help them manage the health of the population. You asked what I'm most excited about in AI and what I'm concerned about. I'll start with what I'm most excited about. What I'm most excited about AI is finally making healthcare smart and helping us personalize the right kind of programs to people so they can actually live healthier, happier, longer lives. And I'm happy to elaborate on that and what we're doing with Dr. AI and some of the other things that we're doing. What I'm concerned about with AI is that we don't turn into the Wild West. HealthTap built its AI applications with knowledge that was collected in the past 7 years from a network of more than 107,000 physicians. And also was everything that we're doing that is related to artificial intelligence, machine learning is always being scrutinized and being tested by thousands and thousands of physicians before we actually release anything to the market. And we open what we're doing to them. We get their advice. We get their votes of confidence, and only then release it to the market. So I'm concerned that anybody that comes to this space doesn't take this kind of approach, because we're dealing with people's lives, right? So it's very important.
No, in fact, that entrepreneurial issue, that's a huge issue. And in fact, a lot of people come from IT and build these wonderful apps and devices, and they take them to doctors and patients. They go, we don't know what to do with this. So, there is a lot of just, how do you position these? So, that's our entrepreneurial voice, and Walter is a bit too. Maria?
Hi, my name is Maria Luisa Pineda. I am the co-founder and CEO of Envisagenics. Envisagenics is one of the latest startups out of Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. We have developed a platform for drug discovery using RNA sequencing and machine learning algorithms to find and discover brand new targets and therapies for patients with diseases like cancer and other genetic disorders. What I think I'm more excited about AI, which I guess I'm a part of, because we use machine learning algorithms to just get better targets. It's the fact that we can now ask big questions because of the amount of data that's being generated, at least in sequencing data. And for patients, it's the only, kind of emotional part is that we're able to deliver new therapies, hopefully sooner and faster for them and their families. What I'm scared for the AI movement is the limits that we're going to be facing soon because of the computing and some of the technologies and the advances of them coming into play.
Okay.
So I'm John Madison. I was a marine biologist and evolutionary biologist before I decided to go to medical school, practiced in the fee-for-service and academic world for a while, and then joined a small startup called Kaiser Permanente. And because of the incentive model, because you get what you incentivize. And I think coming back to David's question about what is our greatest hope and our greatest fear, my greatest hope is that we follow Einstein's advice that if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes deciding what the right question is first and then 5 minutes solving the problem. So I think a lot of what we're seeing in AI today is people not understanding what the right questions are. And I think the right questions were alluded to earlier by both Esther Dyson and Ariana and others in the morning around, we already know that in adverse childhood experiences, our patterns are deeply set for the health span and our lifespan. And so how do we begin to focus some of our work more on children in a pan-generational and a trans-generational approach to solving some of the health problems? And I think we can do that, and I think that we have enough knowledge today. So we're data rich and wisdom poor, as Ariana said. We have enough data today to change how we practice medicine for the next 20 years, but we need a lot more wisdom about how we do that. And where I believe AI can play a role is helping us personalize what works for what individual and link it with a very mature field of motivational science, which was also spoken about this morning, in ways that personalize not just what we tell people, but the narrative and how we put that together in a multi-sensory toolkit in what I call a motivational library of motivicons, which are much broader than what most people think of as an emoticon. So I think AI is really going to help us in personalized medicine to customize how we deliver messages in a motivational framework, especially the younger, the better. What I worry about the most is the current lack of transparency into what's going on. If you haven't read Weapons of Math, M-A-T-H Destruction by Cathy O'Neil, I highly recommend it. It talks about the inherent bias in machine learning, because after all, humans do the supervised learning that machine learning is. And so my concern is what I call the diadarity. So we all know what the singularity is. The diadarity is a term I coined to refer to having the transparency into what's going on in the black box and being able to ask specific questions about it. My fear is the diadarity will not be instrumented soon enough. Although there is promise in both the software and the hardware side, there are people working on transparency into the black box with some very creative, clever tools today.
So fantastic. So Bud?
Yeah, I'm Bud Mishra. I'm a professor of mathematics at the Courant Institute of Mathematical Sciences. I also have a bunch of other affiliations with Cold Spring Harbor Lab, Mount Sinai. I forget the other ones.
He's one of these people. He has 17 titles, yes.
Yeah, I am a tenured professor. I sleep for 8 hours. I go to the gym for 2 hours.
Yeah.
I follow Poincaré Hardy rule of never working for more than 4 hours. Well, I don't go watch cricket, but I could do that. I mean, AI has been sort of part of my life. When I started my PhD at Carnegie Mellon, we had to take a qualifier on AI. I passed it with good grade without learning a thing by using what are called weak methods. Same thing that Siri and Alexa use. Didn't understand a word they said, but aced the exam. But there is actually there's an interesting question. In mathematics, Aristotle started what are called deductive logic. So you start with self-evident truth and derive other truths, theorems and lemmas and things like that. But there's another side, inductive logic, that never really took off. And the reason are two. One is something called Goodman's paradox or GRU paradox, because a lot of things are time dependent. Another is Simpson's paradox, that not all samples are same. So if you take patients and do not stratify, you could get contradictory results. Or if you're looking over time, you could get results, causalities that are not correct. So a particularly important person is Ibn Sina, Avicenna, who wrote a book called El Qanun, The Canon of Medicine. And he actually not just did things like clinical trial, case control, experimental studies, but he also talked about philosophy of inductive logic. But inductive inference never took up. One reason was there was another Arab, Al-Ghazali, who wrote a book called Tahafut al-Philosopher, Incoherence of Philosophy, which is actually core of Sufi philosophy, influencing ISIS probably. But a big breakthrough came through another Andalusian Arab philosopher, Ibn Rushd, Averroes, who wrote a book called Tahafut al-Tahafut. And that influenced the Renaissance philosophers. The primary one is Pietro Pomponazzi, who wrote about why miracles don't work. 100 monks chanting for 10 days will not cause rain. And they burnt his books in Venice. Another is Giordano Bruno, they burnt him. Another is Niccolo Machiavelli, Galileo Galilei, who figured out the difference between chronological time and causal time. So there's a long history of Renaissance, but then there's David Hume, Adam Smith, and ultimately there are people like Supis, and that kind of causality analysis with respect to all these paradoxes and all of this need to be at the core of what we do. And it can't be, just because you can tag some videos does not mean that you actually understand the kinds of mathematical and deep questions come up. Cancer is another good example. It's highly temporal, it's highly heterogeneous. There are 50,000 different types. Each single molecule makes a difference. Each mutation makes a difference. And if you are coming up with a drug, you have to find the target, which patient is ideal, and not give it to off-target. You have to deliver it to the right cell, the tumor cell, not the off-target normal cells. You have to target the right genes, not the off-target.
Bud, I'm going to take that as your hopes and fears.
Okay.
Bud, by the way, I met him fairly recently, and we spent, several hours. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, this whole stream of history. And as we talk about technology, as a historian especially, it is important to put all this in context, because these, especially the philosophical side, and Bud is intriguing. Everybody on the panel is intriguing. Bud is working, on the kind of these philosophical constructs along with the mathematics he does, and moving that into oncology and some other fields. So basically, we have an extraordinary group of people here, and as I said, we represent different facets. We have an internet pioneer, we have an entrepreneur, and I've used Dr. AI. He demoed it for me, which is pretty fascinating. And boy, do I wish we had that. I mean, when I have patient interactions, I have the old, fill out the form and what the hell's going on. If we had that, we have a biologist who is starting a brand new company, around molecular biology and getting into AI. We have a provider and a physician, and working on at a very interesting healthcare system, very different from most in the country, kind of closed system. And you guys have been collecting data, digital data on patients for years, right? I mean, unlike most, yeah.
Decades.
So, yeah, and designing some AI systems, and then Bud, who is, more on the real AI side in terms of being a computer scientist, a designer. So let me ask you guys, when you say artificial intelligence, what actually does that mean to you? And I'm going to preface that by saying that I think we all use this term, and I don't think most of us really mean artificial like literally artificial intelligence. We're really talking about kind of advanced analytics, as I said earlier, all these different technologies. But what does it mean to you from your different perspectives?
Sure. I mean, to simplify.
Or is there a better term? That might be.
Yeah, to simplify it is basically, the power, the real power of machine learning or artificial intelligence is in identifying patterns in human knowledge that we can codify into systems that it can create for us better understanding of the world or better motivation for people to do certain things. It's basically taking human knowledge as a whole and finding the excellence in patterns that work for certain things, and then putting them to work in the context where they're most valuable. So I'll give you an example. What Dr. AI does is basically taking, a knowledge base that we built over almost 7 years of serving answers to people that ask health questions, a lot of them about symptoms. I have this and this and this symptoms. And sending it to doctors to ask, what do I have? What's going on with me? What should I do about it, right? So the problem that people have is, I have some pain or I have discomfort, and I want to figure out what's going on with me and what should I do about it? And they ask it to doctors. And we had more than 100,000 doctors answering these questions, serving them more than 5 billion times to people all over the world, and then taking this knowledge base and start looking for patterns on when people ask on a certain combination of symptoms in a particular context, what do doctors answer, right? What it might be, and what's the best course of action, right? So this is what really AI is very good at. If you have a training set, right, of the best knowledge in the world, not of one physician or a small number of physicians, but a huge number of physicians, and many, many use cases of people asking it, and doctors going back and forth and asking the right question, because when you put a question or a symptom into a search engine, the search engine cannot go back and forth with you like a doctor. If you put a headache in a search engine, how many types of headache can be there? About 300 different manifestations of headache. So having the doctor to ask the question and unpack what kind of a headache you have is very important. Putting it in the context like a doctor would to understand your background, your health history, etc., and then start computing the most likely condition that you may have in the best course of action. So this is a really good use of AI.
So you're talking about really, it's a huge connector.
It's a pattern recognizer.
Yeah,
it's
right.
finding the patterns of how doctors think about a particular issue and serving it in context to people.
And that's basically, it's almost a machine-human interface too, because you've got real people, and I've seen this. I mean, part of it is automated, certain questions, but then you do end up interacting with doctors, so you got that human, machine.
Yeah, because the humans continue training, the doctors continue training the machine all the time, because people ask the question, doctor answer it, they see what happens at the end of the day, and they keep refining the machine all the time. So there's basically a partnership between human and machine, or expert and machine, that make the machine smarter and smarter all the time.
Yeah. Okay, who else wants to jump in that? Maria?
Yeah. So at Envisagenics, the way we use AI is particularly, for instance, to do hypothesis-driven experimentation. So scientists throughout history have actually used a scientific method to experimentally and formulate their hypotheses and test them. Most of the time, it was done one at a time in the laboratory and so forth. So what we use AI for at Envisagenics is actually using machine learning algorithms to allow scientists to actually be able to test many or maybe thousands of hypotheses at once using high computing. And what this allows us to do is actually give a particular information to the scientists to make better decisions at the end of the day, and what to follow on, what to spend resources. So for instance, in us for drug discovery, right now it's around an average of 10 years and $2.1 billion to develop one therapy. So what do we need? How do we accelerate this process? If each of those is one hypothesis, if we could do this using AI and machine learning algorithms, so we could accelerate this process and actually hypothesis-driven algorithms that allows the scientists not to take away the scientists, actually just give them the tool to hypothesize faster and easier way, so they could actually choose what to follow and where the resources that they think and why they should add that investment and those resources, so we could get drugs faster to the community.
And you're dealing actually in your own work in the molecular level.
Yeah.
And we have all these omics. We heard about some of that earlier on the cancer panel and some others. I mean, you've got genomics to start with, which actually was the first thing people looked at because it was easiest, but we've got proteomics, we've got the microbiome.
We
we've
are
got-
transcriptomics. for
Right,
instance.
transcriptomics and metabolomics.
Yes.
And, I mean, just saying those words with all those syllables makes my head spin. I mean, trying to figure out, but the amount of data being produced even now,
It's
and some of those are in their early phases. We aren't even close, and they're dynamic processes too. The microbiome,
Yeah.
I mean, they're not static like the genome mostly is. So how do you see this? I mean, well, actually, just follow up on my own
Yeah.
question there. How do you, how does this play out in
the AI work?
developing it? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually, as Ron was putting it, the more data we get, the more training sets our AI algorithms have to train on. So the better they become and the bigger the database is. So for instance, at Envisagenics, we focus on RNA therapeutics and RNA, which is in the omics world called transcriptomics.
Yeah.
So in the transcriptomic world, in order for us to actually use the RNA and all the sequencing that's being developed by all, through all these sequencing, efforts and through all the patients, is not only to actually use these data, but actually use other type of data that scientists as features that will allow us to do hypothesis-driven AI and actually formulate those and give us a better, for instance, I think Bud was referring to, with our platform, we are able not only to find new targets, but actually then model that target for an RNA therapeutic. Yeah. And on top of modeling that little piece of RNA that will become a drug that could be delivered to the patient, we also can model where are the off-target effects, what gene, how the protein is going to be done, what patients could be delivered to, what type of patients are those, what age, what sex, all those things that are extremely important in at least for oncology moving forward, personalized medicine.
And RNA, by the way, is what reads DNA.
Yeah,
And
is the-
we only have 20,000 genes, which actually seems like just a few compared to what people thought. But RNA goes into different parts of the genes, and it's, I don't know, millions of.
Is the editing, so that's what my company
Yes.
does.
So anyway, that's why it's so complicated.
It's
John.
so complicated, the complexity.
Yeah.
So for patient, we could go, from 4 teras, if you want to talk about AI, to 40 teras, because we don't only have the whole transcriptome or the copy of your DNA, but we also have the metadata that goes along with that, which means what type of patient, what tissue was the tumor extracted from, what stage was the patient in, all those things that, how is the protein being structured, what type of drugs are available right now, so all that data is what you feed into your AI in order to actually create these hypotheses.
And by the way, these two people aren't, what they're doing isn't connected up yet, but that's just 2 elements. So,
Yeah.
John, tell us about the provider side.
I want to key off of what Maria was describing, because there's been a couple of absolutely fascinating discoveries in the past couple of months. One is, it comes back to RNA, is that someone said earlier today that 95% of those of us living today will not have actionable information coming out of our genome. And that's because our genome is up and down regulated daily on a diurnal pattern, massive variations in our transcriptome throughout the course of a day. And guess what? Our microbiome, those bacteria that live in our gut, have diurnal patterns as well, very substantial diurnal patterns. And the RNA that they leak across the bowel is what has a profound effect on regulating our genome expression. So our microbiome expression and its diurnal pattern has a huge impact on our genomic expression throughout the day. So the complexity of that, you can imagine, is beyond the capacity of the human brain. So this is where machine learning becomes essential. And Maria's reference to generating thousands of hypotheses, I like to think of serendipity in silico. So serendipity is often when you recognize that something is really interesting out of those thousands of hypotheses. So one of the 2 studies that were published recently, one is a study of cavernous venous malformations in the brain in a population severely affected by these. It's a genetic basis, but what they serendipitously discovered is there's a single bacterium, a type of bacterium, gram-negative rod, that causes the malformation to progress. And then in the mice model, they've been able to do fecal transplants, eliminate that bacterium in those mice affected by the gene that causes the malformations, and completely arrest further development of those malformations. So the fecal transplant actually is one of the earliest demonstrations, there are others, of a therapeutic intervention based upon the science. The last thing I'll mention is there was another study published recently about a very common genetic variant which about a third of us are homozygous, about a third of us are heterozygous, and a third of us don't carry it, which is highly associated with accelerated cognitive impairment beginning in the 60s, in the age of the 60s, not the 60s none of us remember. And so what they found is that there's a viral infection that activates that genome and upregulates its activity in a way that leads to that cognitive impairment. So if you start thinking about the interaction of the immune system, the microbiome, the genome, the transcriptome, and all of these factors, it's so far beyond the human capacity. So it is this hypothesis generation in silico, or serendipity in silico, as I like to call it, that must be recognized by what I like to refer to as a metatopical brain forest. What I mean by that is a tropical rainforest is one of nature's greatest examples of how genetic diversity can take a very nutrient-poor environment and maximize the capture of solar energy and conversion into carbon-based life. The same is true for understanding what to do with thousands of hypotheses and to create serendipity in silico. And that is, you must have a team of people who cross different disciplines working together to look at these thousands of hypotheses. If all you have is data scientists, or all you have is people who are great at programming algorithms, and you don't have people with clinical and operational knowledge in genomic and transcriptomic in the room trying to understand where the serendipity resides within those thousands of hypotheses generated, we're going to be stuck in a loop that's very costly and not very productive.
And
Yeah.
you're also,
Yeah.
hang on.
So-
Go ahead, bud.
So the part of, so just to curb our enthusiasm, part of the problem is multiple hypothesis testing. So what that means is that if you generate more and more hypotheses, some of them serendipitously, falsely can turn out to be true. So if you torture the data, they will confess. If you waterboard them, they'll confess more. So, I mean, somebody mentioned John McCain, so he's my hero too. So one of the big problems is how do you generate hypotheses? Here is an example. If you look at the patient visit data, a patient who has visited a physician 3 times without a diagnosis is likely to be in a critical condition within a month or so. Why is that? What's the difference between a physician returning the patient with diagnosis and without diagnosis? About $22.63. He has an incentive to do that. So the real cause is not that the pattern is predicting something. There's something else that's causally related to that hypothesis. And we need to see that.
What do we need to do to protect ourselves from those fears?
Well, I think if you take any DNA framework and put it under a heat lamp, and you have human DNA, eventually it will evolve structure. Once it has evolved structure, it will speak. Once it will evolve structure, it will see. Once it will see, it will speak. When it will speak, it will think. And once it will think, it will predict. So that's intelligence. So that's why language and vision are the most important part of our intelligence. Probably intelligence is vision raised to the power of language. So how do we build that now into silicon, straight? We don't need consciousness as a substrate, so we left that behind. So there are 2 schools in AI now. There's what I call the old school, and the old school is the school who does statistics programs in R and uses MATLAB. And they use discriminate means like support vector machines, decision trees, things you can sort of explain. And there is a new school, which has an enormous success, the connectionists, deep neural networks, unsupervised, very deep, lots of dimensions that we can reduce. These schools have, in the last 3 years, have 37% error correction. So they are now surpassing humans, basically. The only problem with that school is, and that school doesn't use, or hardly uses statistics, more like multivariable calculus and Python and deep neural networks. That school has one barrier against it, that in healthcare, doctors want to be able to understand why these black boxes tell us what to do, while actually medicine is the biggest black box of all. It's completely qualitative, very, very small, data, symptoms. We are no longer in the symptom age. We are in the age of algorithms. So that's going to be the big thing. How can we convince doctors that, as in mathematics, we have different fields we don't understand, we just bridge it over, Ramanujan, we still don't understand how he came up with the infinity. And we have to do the same with these black boxes. And we now have great tools like stochastic gradient descent, where we can sort of control it. But it's a leap of faith.
Yeah. So Ron, yeah.
Yeah, so I want to go back to, there's all the big picture things that are very, very important and fascinating, and how we tie them all together to get a great understanding of the human, and it creates a big level of interest, but also complexity. That is kind of like scary, right? So instead of that, like I keep thinking to myself, or maybe because I'm an entrepreneur, I keep thinking about MVPs all the time. What's the minimally viable product that we can do today to solve a human problem? You talked about a tool, Boot. You talked about Einstein, right? Like talking about what question we're asking and what problem we're trying to solve today with the tools that we already have in hand to help people accomplish something in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days with fantastic tools that we already have today. So let's think about this way for just a second, right? What can we do with AI, right? So we used AI in the past 20 years in Silicon Valley to be able to do behavior change in commerce, right? We're taking people now with ads, right? We use ads, words, pictures, videos, and making people that used to buy one product buy the other product, or take people that used to buy no product and buy a product or a service, right? Mm-hmm. So we are able to understand user behavior in commerce in a way that causes behavior change in commerce, right? Hold on one second. We perfected that in the last 20 years in Silicon Valley to an art, right? Like we're doing it really well. Google does it really well. Amazon does it extremely well, right? Netflix is doing it amazingly well. Why not apply exactly the same frameworks to behavior change in healthcare? Mm-hmm. Rather than making you buy, a ticket to a show or this laundry detergent, why don't we help you take your medication using exactly the same tools that we perfected in the past 20 years, using words, pictures, videos, right, to help a patient take a medication that they don't take more than 50% of the time after prescription, after they take it, use a medical device, right, get another doctor appointment or a test done and interpreted. These are all small, simple actions that they should take to get to a better outcome that we know will happen. Right? So we have the tool set in our hand. This is what these companies are using AI every single day. So we are hiring now these data scientists that are doing it in ads. And instead of serving ads to people, HealthTap could have made exactly $120 million in the past two years in just serving ads on our pages. We're not doing any ads, but we're hiring the same machine learning people and data scientists to start using exactly the same tools to convince people to take a medication or use a medical device. This is a good use of AI.
Hang on a second. So I'm not getting anyone here to bite on where we're really going with this, like some of the darker, things that might happen. I mean, there are people who talk about, privacy. We've talked about that today. We willingly give up our data on the one hand, and we freak out about our medical data. I think that was a very good comment that, just kind of depends on if we get some use out of it or we think we get use out of it. So there's the privacy issues, a lot of ethical issues. I mean, we're going to be turning over, one of the nice things about AI is it processes this data, connects it, it sees patterns, but it also hands it off in ways. And we are used to doing this with banking and some other things. There's also issues about, John, I might ask you about, is your job going to be replaced by a robot equipped with AI at some point? I mean, you're already seeing
a lot of people, I'm not worried. A lot of people are inverting the AI and coming up with IA as intelligence augmentation. And I think that's much more realistic about what we're going to see. And the hope is that rather than disintermediate everybody in what they currently do, is to augment what they do with intelligent augmentation of all sorts, not just machine learning, but robotics and the whole spectrum. And so we can upskill everybody. The problem that I see, and I blogged about this yesterday, is that this intelligent augmentation may be disproportionately effective for those at higher levels of access to education and socioeconomic status, and that we may see an acceleration of the social inequities. And that's part of what Kathy O'Neill talked about in Weapons of Math Destruction, is there's inherent biases towards social inequity in the machine learning black box. So that's why I've been very interested in the Diadarity and how do we provide a level of transparency. So there's a fellow in Silicon Valley with a startup. Biomimicry, by the way, has been phenomenal in terms of helping us understand how to tune what machine learning does. Machine learning basically operates on a pyramid of algorithms, and there's a reason that our brain cortex is called the pyramidal cortex. It's very similar in how it works. The big difference to date is that almost everything in a traditional machine learning stack is feed forward. There's very little feedback. And the brain has lots of feedback loops. And so transparency may be a collateral benefit of providing more of a feedback process within machine learning than exists in most models today. And there's people, as I say, working on that. There's also people at Intel who are working on, not to call them out specifically, because other people are working on it, but Intel is looking at how to instrument what goes on inside the processor to provide more transparency in that black box. So how we provide that transparency will not only help us accelerate how to learn using machine learning and large data sets, but will hopefully give us some sort of transparency into what's actually going on. The FDA is profoundly worried about this. The FDA is incredibly interested in reinventing themselves, recognizing this new reality of the black box world that we're entering in. You put data in and you get an answer out, and how do you know? And if overall everybody's better, but occasionally you kill somebody with a really stupid mistake, what does that mean in terms of policy? What does that mean in terms of FDA approval? We need to have a whole different way of looking at the transparency and what goes on inside that black box.
No, in fact, that's a whole nother area which is fascinating. You know, how is this regulated? I mean, the FDA is having a hard time, and a lot of other new technologies, keeping up, you know, with technologies from invented 15, 20 years ago, and this will be a big change. But let me, in our last few minutes here, open it up to you all. We could, obviously, this is another enormous topic we could spend a lot of time on, but you all hopefully have been pondering this. Any questions out there? Yes.
Yes, hi. My name is John Meyer. I'm a pharmacist and a scientist, both working as a director of pharmacy here in New York City for many years, and also for a pharmaceutical company for many years as well. I was especially intrigued by Dr. DeBrouwer and, of course, the whole panel, but talking about old school and new school. And I recently finished a book called The Undoing Project, and I think you would all probably be familiar with the work of Kahneman and Tversky. And I'd like to see what you think about whether they're considered old school, new school, or some sort of hybrid, if you're familiar.
Well,
I'm
it's a
assuming
hybrid.
you're familiar with them.
It's a hybrid because, you know, a lot of people from the old school are my friends.
So you have to be nice.
But, you know, also the dominant university has been, you know, it used to be, you know, MIT. Now it's clearly Stanford for language and vision. So everything is changing, and especially with, with Python coming into the mix and things becoming, you know, and TensorFlow as horizontal AI. But, you know, coming back to that black box thing, so isn't is a machine where you put things in and things come out, and you don't know exactly what's going in between? That should be, if that should be actually regulated by the FDA, then every doctor should be a 510K. Because a doctor is the ultimate black box. And makes a lot more mistakes than our black boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's grab another question. Maybe, yeah. Let's go over here, and then.
Walter, you said before it was unclear how to get doctors to adopt the outcomes of black boxes, but it seems to me that data and outcomes would be very persuasive. So if you were able to show a doctor that the output from a black box was able to diagnose or lead to a better treatment than would otherwise occur, that would persuade doctors. Do you think otherwise?
It is. So I don't know, you know, in the 90s we made WordNets, you know, for computational linguists. Then ImageNet came now last week. Stanford open-sourced medical ImageNet, 0.5 petabytes of data, 1.2 billion radiology images, 4.4 narrative radiology reports, 23,000 conditions. There, radiologists are convinced because basically the machine does a better deal than, than a carbon-based unit. And so I think they...
Unit.
That's true.
Although it's a black box, because this vision, Inception 3, which we use, is basically, deep neural network.
But it doesn't need to be a black box. I mean, everyone's talking about the black box. I think that we can actually leverage the fact that we have a lot of doctors out there, not an individual doctor or an expert, but actually take the physician community, right, and help them open the black box to them, right? Tell them how the method works. What are the algorithms that we're using? And more than that, when the machine starts spitting back results, we've done it with Dr. AI. What we did is we trained the algorithms, we got the result, we broke it down to individual results, we start sending it to physicians one by one. So a set of symptoms, context, right? And here's the outcome, and let them vote yes or no. Not one physician, not a panel of 10 physicians, but more than 10,000 physicians, right? In 141 specialties. Allow them to say for individual results, yes or no. Wait until a statistically significant number of doctors answer either yes or no to either retrain the machine when it's a no, right? What the physician community thinks, right? Or say yes, enough physicians, right? That each and every one is individually trained, think that at least what the machine is doing is right. And then you can retrain the machine again and again and again. It's an organic thing that actually works together to make the machine better all the time. When you open the black box to the physician to tell them how it's computed. Yeah. Now you have visibility and nobody's concerned about that.
Yeah. I have another one.
Quickly. I want to get another question.
For us, for molecular biology and bioinformatics, our black box does need a predictive analytics, and it has to be experimentally tested. And our actual percentage of accuracy is not based on the black box predicting. It's actually the experimental validation done by scientists of our predictive analytics. And then from there, not only experimentally validation, publish it, but also going into, for instance, using the Cancer Genome Atlas, TCGA, and looking into 10,000 or more, almost 20,000 cancer patients, and finding the same correlations that your predictive algorithm found, and then testing it back in mice and then in further patients. So unless we do that with our black boxes, then our scientists, at least for us, are then saying, okay, your predictive power, I guess, is true.
Well, this is best of trust. I mean, we have a lot of black boxes we deal with in other industries we use all the time. So anyway, let me get one more question here, bud. Sorry. Yeah, right over here.
Hi, thanks. Dimitri Kofinas. Two things. One, a sort of observation on something that Dr. DeBrouwer said about the black box. I think it's true that each physician is a black box and that they're qualitative. However, a patient can ask for an explanation from a physician and derive some sort of answer and response. I think the concern with the algorithms is that we don't understand that process in the soup. And there are so many variables that are coming in.
You can derive the same thing from a machine.
So we now have, so Stanford has Squat, which is the big data set with inference. It's pretty, it's now possible actually with like 72% of accuracy that the machine unsupervised goes to look for things that it can explain. Because basically it's a bit like when I sit before a student and I ask him a question, he's first going to give me a definition from a textbook. Now I'm going to find out if he really understands, say it in your own words, and then I'm going to make him or her reason to see if these steps are there. The same thing we are now working on for machines, and I think the paradigm shift in language and reasoning will come in probably next year or the year afterwards.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it.
My thing was just about the foundational mathematics points you were making on the
You guys,
paradoxes.
unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it here, and we can pick it up later. I was under strict instructions to end on time. So
We
anyway,
will stay here. We can talk about that.
Listen, these are all amazing topics, and I think this fall at Techonomy on California we'll talk more.
Can I just say 1 second?
Yeah.
So there are other things we do, clinical trials, cell lines, organoids. We're not going to eliminate those. That would be a very bad idea. We also have mechanistic explanations. We look at pathways, we look at gene regulation. We also do that kind of causal structures. I don't think black box eliminates any of those. We're not going to shut down clinical trials, FDAs. They're part of, they need to be integrated together.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank our 5 black boxes here up on the panel.